so much for being here tonight. I am so grateful to Parenting with Pride for having me have this conversation with you. And thank you for being here for Generations of Love, a conversation for grandparents and family allies of trans youth. I'm Dr. Danny Rosenkrantz. I'm a licensed psychologist and an expert in gender affirming care. I am based personally in Tampa from South Florida, born and raised in Florida, and it's my home. And so, I'm here as one of you, thinking about how do we navigate all of these different challenges. And I'm the owner of a private practice called Brave Space Psychology, which is virtual. Again, I'm based here physically, but I'm actually something called SIPAC certified, so I can provide therapy in 42 plus states. I offer gender affirming care assessments, coaching, which includes affirming grandparent coaching. So if you are interested in that, we can talk later. Consulting, and I also do some state advocacy and particularly have worked with Equality Florida to do some of that and have been really, really grateful for their support in that work. The reason I was chosen to do this conversation today is because I have experience working with grandparents just like you. I have been co-facilitating one of my favorite things, Transgeneration, a grandparents group focused on supporting grandparents with trans and gender expansive youth. And we actually are going to be inviting folks. I'm going to pop the link into the chat at some point, if I can figure out where it is. There we go. If you're interested in joining after having this conversation, it's a really amazing space and we're still enrolling. I'll make sure that I put this back up at the end as well. But we have had this group that has been a really powerful space for grandparents just like yourselves to navigate. And so based on the work I've done with them and what I've learned, I wanted to share this with my Florida community. And so in honor of kind of starting this space, I know Jennifer already invited some of this to happen. I would love, as you're thinking about what's bringing you here today, to, if you feel so inclined to share, tell us in the chat. You already mentioned where you're coming from. We'd love to hear what motivated you to join us tonight. If you want to share, sometimes it's nice to share it like your grandchild's age or things that might be helpful for building community on here. And if there are any particular questions you hope I answer, I'm definitely going to be trying to be comprehensive tonight, but I know this is the start of a journey. And I would love to hear what would be most helpful to kind of focus our conversation today. I also want to set some intentions for our space together. I think one of the most challenging parts of working towards affirmation is navigating the shame that can come up when we care so deeply and we want to do a good job. We want to make sure we're offering support. I have no doubt that if you are here, you made time today to be in this space, it's because you care deeply about your grandchild. Or about this family member, if you are an elder here with another type of relative. And so in the spirit of that, I want to just offer a growth and learning mindset. Mistakes are part of the process when we're learning something new. And so that's okay. And it's real. And I hope that together we can hold some space for that. If you are someone who tends to be someone who finds ease in sharing and taking space, I invite you to, be mindful of how much space you take up. And if you are someone who is more hesitant to share, but you haven't had a space like this to get support, please use this opportunity to build connections. We want to hear from you. Certainly, if people share vulnerable things, I invite you to take the lessons from each other, but really be intentional about leaving the stories. And as I mentioned at the beginning, this is not the end of a conversation. We're not going to tie it in a bow. We're going to have some non-closure at the end of this. And that's why I really wanted to offer that there are other spaces, whether it's through group spaces that we'll be sharing with you, or even meeting with me afterwards, that having space to continue talking about this is really important to acknowledge we're not going to have that closure. But why are we here? I know we already had a really important introduction to some of the challenges that folks are facing, even just today. It feels like every day we are navigating a new fire sometimes. Uh, and that is only further reason why your support matters. Family support and grandparent support is so essential. We know that it is something we call it a protective factor. So when there are risks for mental health challenges, things like depression, anxiety, suicidality, family support is one of the biggest protective factors to help mitigate these kind of outcomes. And it also can be really powerful for increasing confidence, safety, and connection. There's a really great resource out of San Francisco called the Family Acceptance Project. And they have done a lot of work looking at families and looking at the impact of families' behaviors in terms of the impact on their children. And I think one of the best findings that I like to share is that, when youth are experiencing their family as accepting, it shifts whether they believe in their future as a happy one. Yeah, and whether they can see themselves in the future, and I think this is an outcome that we really can see connected to, the struggle folks can feel with depression, anxiety, suicidality. Hope is a really powerful antidote to these things, and so your love matters. It makes a huge difference. It can absolutely change someone's life, and this grandchild that you know and care so deeply about's life. So don't sell yourself short. If I know that this can be hard work, I know it can be challenging, and it really makes a big difference. So your effort is meaningful. And recently, we also, the Trevor Project's amazing, and they do some really great survey work, and they actually look specifically at Florida. And from a survey they did looking at Florida's youth, rates of LGBTQ plus young people who have felt supported in the past year from family were not as great as they could have been, which further deepens how pivotal, how important you working on creating supportive spaces is, right? 81% of LGBTQ youth in general, and then trans and non-binary youth at 85% experience their family as low or moderate support. We need you. We need you to be in that space of offering safety and letting young people know that there are grandparents, there are elders here who care. And I know that this can be challenging. And so I want to take a moment again, having sat with grandparents who have been in similar shoes. I know that a lot of emotions can come up, a lot of questions. And some of these are the most common that I've heard of. Not an exhaustive list by any means. If you have other questions, again, please let me know in the chat. But some of the things I've heard most commonly are, what if I say the wrong thing? What if I use the wrong pronoun? A lot of anxiety about doing it right. That can sometimes get in the way of trying or experimenting. I don't understand, but I want to. A lot of confusion, whether it's confusion about what an identity term means or confusion about how a child could know this about themselves. That confusion can be a real stuck point for a lot of elders. I'm afraid for their safety. Gosh, is this a big one, especially in today's time? That fear is real, it is valid, and I don't want to sugarcoat that there isn't, something to be concerned about. And something I often say, the group that I run is centered in Jewish community, and I often talk about that when you hold an identity that is othered, like being LGBTQ plus, like being trans, non-binary, and in that case, like being Jewish, uh, it's very easy to have the fear be centered, but the fear isn't everything. That there is a lot of beauty and richness in these communities, and you know, I've rarely heard in my Jewish spaces that because we are afraid that we should not be Jewish anymore. And so I say the same thing in this case, that certainly there is thoughtfulness around how do we take care, how do we create community, and your love is a big part of providing protection, and building that confidence is a shield. against some of the ways that the harmful words that young people might experience. It's harder to infiltrate when they feel so deeply loved by people. And I can't understate how impactful it is for elders like yourselves to be that support. But that fear is real. And sometimes it's just uncomfortable. This feels unfamiliar. This one comes up a lot, particularly the discomfort around pronouns, especially they, them pronouns. I know it's not what you were taught in school, and that can feel very challenging. And again, I can't emphasize enough that the bang for your buck of that practice and practicing using pronouns, even if they are unfamiliar, getting comfortable, you can do that with time, with practice, with support from others in your life. And again, it can be life saving. Another thing I often hear from grandparents is that because of their positionality in their families, maybe because of location where people live, especially in this moment when families are literally having to move to find access to care, that they can often feel very left out. That maybe there's assumptions about how you're going to react to your grandchild that feel unfair. Maybe there's just distance where you don't know what's going on, you don't know what decisions are being made. And that can feel hard when you care so deeply. That hurt is real. And then finally, I miss my grandchild. Loss is a very real part, not for everyone. I don't want to make that assumption that that's real for everyone, but I think for many people, we gain an attachment. Gender is one of those things that even from, when the time you hear that someone's having a child, we start associating and part of how we make meaning and start building this relationship can be connected to gender. And so whether it's your identity as the grandmother of a granddaughter or grandfather of a grandson or vice versa, that can be challenging to process sometimes that that person is not exactly as you consider, that relationship is different, that you're actually the grandmother of a grandson or someone who just likes to be called a grandchild, or the process of coming to see your grandchild as they truly are, not the expectations that you thought they would be, can be painful at times. And I hope that through this conversation, you feel more empowered to better understand that your grandchild is still your grandchild. They are still the person that you know. You're just seeing them more fully, and that can really deepen your relationship. And so I want to spend some time today really helping you build tools. I want you to feel more confident. And to me, what I have learned is that the key to building confidence is awareness, education, support, and lots of practice. So I'm going to start by trying to build your capacity in these different areas. And there's a lot for us to cover. And I think one of the richest part of this journey is really starting to do some reflective work with yourself, because we are all socialized in gender and you have your own story when it comes to your expression and experience of gender. So I invite you to really think about what are some of those ways that you have thought about gender. I'm going to read you some questions, and I would love if you feel comfortable to share in the chat any of these that speak to you. You don't have to answer all of them by any means, but I think they're really important questions to start marinating on as you come to understand your grandchild's experience. It can be really important to understand our own. What messages did I receive growing up about what it means to be a woman or a man? Who taught me these ideas? How do I express my gender? Clothing, voice, or gestures? Which part feels authentic and which feels expected or automatic? When do I feel most myself in terms of gender? Have I ever felt restricted or pressured to act a certain way because of my gender? How do I respond when others talk about gender diversity? What emotions come up? Curiosity, discomfort, defensiveness, pride? Who in my life models a different or expansive relationship to gender? What have I learned from them? Take a moment. And again, if you feel comfortable, I invite you to share in the chat if any of these speak to you. You can choose your adventure.
I'll jump in and answer the
Yeah.
last one because I think that one's the easiest for me. And anyone who knows me and knows my child, um, who in my life models a different or expansive relationship to gender would be my youngest child, Cooper. And what I've learned is that he can live his life authentically and proudly. And I'm always saying I'm in awe of how brave he is because I don't think, I know I would have never, um, probably even to this day, been able to just live as openly and confidently as him. So I'm sure there's a lot of folks on this call that also look at their grandchild or their child in awe of that, of how they just don't really follow what society sets as rules or stereotypes, but really just lives their life out loud. And so for me, that's the one I would answer is I look at him and I'm constantly in awe of how
Mm,
he lives his life. So I'm sure there's others that feel the same.
thank you for sharing. I know one that I often hear from elders I've worked with is talking about pressures for women identified grandparents around pants and skirts growing up, that uh, it was a process to be able to wear pants freely or short haircuts. There were a lot of different gender expectations that many folks described finding a lot of comfort in now, but having to go through a journey of kind of fighting to be able to have that freedom. That I think we can draw some wisdom from that history and experience when we think about what grandchildren are going through. Feel free to keep marinating on these and feel free to keep adding them to the chat if you have any thoughts that come up. But I think what I want you to take away from this moment is that your self reflection on your own process is a beautiful starting point for you to build your capacity for empathy with what is going on with your grandchild. I also want to empower you with terminology information and information in general around a lot of these terms that you might hear when trying to understand your grandchild's experience. I want to share with you here this is something called the gender unicorn, and it's created to help us have a deeper understanding of some common terms and concepts related to gender and sexual identity. So the first one here we have is gender identity. You can see here it's a rainbow with like a thought bubble, and that's really a great way of signifying that gender identity is the way we think about ourselves, our felt sense of gender. And this can be different for different people. Some folks might describe their gender as a woman, a girl, a female. Some might describe male, man, boy, and there can be other genders that people feel connected to as well. We're going to talk in a moment about some different terms you might hear. Then there's gender expression. I think about this as how we share our gender, how we express maybe masculinity or femininity through clothes, through hair. Uh, those are the kinds of things that we communicate about how we feel connected to gender. Now, it's important to note a nuance here is that you can't tell somebody's gender identity explicitly from their gender expression, that some folks might have different gender identities than the way they express for a variety of reasons. It might be that they feel a fluidity in their gender that makes them want to express differently on different days. It might be that they are navigating discriminatory spaces where they have to be mindful of how they express themselves. There can be lots of reasons. There's no one reason, but the only way you know someone's gender identity is if they tell you. There's another concept here that you might be familiar with at this point, with all the talk about trans youth in our world, and it's sex assigned at birth. This, quite simply, is the idea that when a child is born, the doctor gives a sexual assignment based on secondary sex characteristics like chromosomes. There are three typical kind of assignments that we often see: female, male, and there can also be an assignment called intersex, which is a way of describing an experience where folks have a unique combination of secondary sex characteristics. Sometimes folks find this out at birth, and other times they might not even find out that they are intersex until later in life, like let's say when it's time for menstruation to start and that doesn't occur. And after further exploration, they might learn this information. So those are three of the big concepts when it comes to gender. And then below, we see two hearts, an orange heart and a red heart. The orange heart is a way of signifying physical attraction. Folks can be attracted to different genders. Some folks are attracted to women, some men, some other genders. And similarly, we can have emotional attraction to women, men, and other genders as well. These are not mutually exclusive. We can have different attraction to different people in terms of our physical and our emotional. There can be nuance there. People can also experience one and not the other. So for example, someone might feel emotional attraction, but not physical, and they might use the term asexual to describe their experience. Sometimes people feel the opposite. They feel sexual attraction, but not romantic attraction. They might use the term aromantic to describe that experience. I don't want you to feel bogged down and pressured to remember every single identity term because there's so many and they're often changing as generations are finding words to fit themselves more authentically. But just to say that being open to deepening our understanding of the complexity of gender, the complexity of attraction, as we're trying to better understand our grandchildren. I also wanted to just share some general terms around identity. So there are lots of different terms that people might use. Identity labels could be another way people describe these. And this is absolutely not an exhaustive list. There are lots of different terms people use, and this is a good starting place. So a lot of times we hear the word cisgender or transgender. Cisgender, cis is the Latin for same, and it is a way of saying that the sex you were assigned at birth by that doctor is the same as the gender that you grow up to feel. For transgender, this isn't the same. So there's a change, trans meaning change, that the sex you were assigned at birth is different in some way from the gender that you feel. Non-binary is a term that folks sometimes use to basically say, I don't identify as a man or a woman. I might identify more expansively beyond that. It might be both, it may be neither. It can be a unique experience for each person. Genderqueer is a term that is a broad term for gender identity that doesn't feel like it conforms to traditional gender norms. Agender, much like aromantic and asexual, it has that Latin root for not in the front. So it's a way of saying I'm a person who identifies as not having a gender or as gender neutral. Bigender might be someone who identifies with two genders or might simultaneously or vary over time. Gender fluid might be a term some folks use to describe shifts over time in their gender. And in some indigenous cultures, folks use the term two-spirit to describe an experience of having multiple genders within the same person. And this is a very sacred role in some indigenous North American communities. So again, not an exhaustive list, but an important one. I also thought I'd review some different aspects of transition because I know that transition can be a complicated experience and has a lot of different layers and can be part of what makes this process so new and overwhelming is there's a lot of nuance to it. So I wanted to break it down into some different categories. This is, again, an overview. So there is more complexity in all of these things than we can account for in this brief time we have together. But some of the social aspects of transition include name changes, presentation and dress, and pronoun changes. Not everybody wants to do any of these things that I say. I have no idea what your grandchild wants. And it is something that I think is enriched by having a conversation with each trans person about what would make the most sense for them. Name changes can involve, choosing a new name for some folks. Some folks are fine keeping their name. Some folks want a new name. It can be an emotional process. Sometimes they have to try on some different names to find the one that feels the most authentic. It may also require a legal name change. Depending on your grandchild's experience, sometimes it can be a really beautiful opportunity to co-create and choose a name together that you have experience with the thoughtfulness around name changes. And culturally, names can also have a lot of meaning. So sometimes a way of moving through the discomfort and the loss of whatever name your family chose can be joining together and choosing a name together. Not always an option. Your grandchild may or may not be open to that, but it can be a beautiful thing when it happens. As far as presentation, this can involve changing clothes, haircuts. It might involve body hair removal and growth, makeup, something called binding and tucking. Binding is when folks wear a fabric around their chest to minimize the size of their chest. Tucking is when folks tuck their genitals to minimize the size of those. So these are efforts people sometimes make to feel more authentically like themselves in their bodies without surgical intervention. Pronoun changes. There are many different pronouns folks might use. You might have noticed in my name on Zoom, I have she and they. That's the pronouns that I feel most comfortable with. Some folks might want to change pronouns from the ones they were typically using to ones that feel more authentic to them. Again, might be a process. For some folks, they're open to all pronouns. Some want you to just use their name. It's really a practice of honoring what your grandchild specifically asked for, respecting pronouns, and particularly when you make mistakes, because I know this is a sensitive one for a lot of folks, if you can get into a practice of briefly apologizing and self-correcting mistakes, it can be a way of just acknowledging, I'm working on this, I know it has an impact, and I'm going to keep monitoring myself and practicing. And genuinely practicing can make a really big impact on your grandchild. Now, talking about medical aspects of transition. This one I think is particularly emotional today when we know that there is the loss of access to these things. And yet, I think it's important to empower you with information about the truth about these medications. So, one of the main medications you might have heard of is something called a puberty blocker. These are used to pause puberty in young people. Depending on where young people are in their process of puberty, a doctor might prescribe this to pause the puberty process from continuing to give youth more time. They're typically given as injections or implants. They are reversible. Puberty resumes if stopped. I'll say that one again because there's a lot of confusion about that. They are reversible. They give youth time to explore their identity before permanent changes. They stop the development of features like deep voice or breast growth, things that happen with puberty, right? And studies show that pubertal suppression for trans adolescents is associated with decreased lifetime suicidal ideation and overall better mental health outcomes. One thing I didn't note here is that they also are not new. They were used for something called precocious puberty for a long time. They are still accessible for that, which I think further underscores that the policies being put forth are discriminatory against trans youth because this medication is absolutely still being used and is accessible if you have a different diagnosis than gender dysphoria. But they're not new. They have been used for a long time. Doctors are aware of how to manage them and do so with care, and they are reversible. Now, youth might, as they are also figuring out their identities, start a desire for hormone therapy. Similarly, not new. These have been used in lots of different places. If you are someone who's ever gone through menopause, you might have discussed hormone therapy with your doctors. It's the same medication. They are used to initiate physical changes, in this case, that align with gender identity. You can take these as pills, patches, gels, injections, or implants, so lots of different ways. Some changes are permanent in this case, so thoughtfulness is warranted. The changes might be things like breast growth or your voice that are more permanent, but there are some changes that can go back. So, for example, the way that your body stores fat in different parts of your body, depending on the hormones that you experience, that would typically go back. If you are on hormone therapy and you pause, you might resume having menstruation. That's another example of something that might resume. So not everything is permanent. Some changes are. This is typically began after puberty or while on blockers. It can also be given, and it supports physical, emotional, and social gender congruence. And some folks may choose to undergo fertility preservation because the impact of hormone therapy on uh, fertility is less clear. Everybody's body is different. I think an important note here is that that is also true about cisgender people's bodies, and that the assumption of fertility is not a guaranteed one. As someone who has gone through fertility treatment myself, I think that we sometimes have the assumption that everyone's going to be able to have children in a particular way, and that is not the case. So just being mindful that fertility preservation can be part of this process, and discussing options for having a family in lots of different ways can be beneficial for families if children desire to have children in the future. I have also talked to a lot of young people who are pretty clear in not wanting to have biological children. And it makes a lot of sense to me in the sense that if they are engaging in wanting to affirm a different gender than they were assigned at birth, right? That going through a biological procreation process might feel very dysphoric for them, very different than the gender that they feel aligned with. And so that might not be something they feel comfortable with. And it might be because, again, everybody's different. Another aspect of medical transition can be gender affirming surgery. This is when people engage in procedures that align their body with their gender identity through surgical intervention. This is typically considered in adulthood, sometimes in late adolescence for things like mastectomy, breast removal, where this is allowed. It is not currently allowed in Florida for anyone other than adults. Certainly, these changes are permanent. They have permanent physical, emotional, and social benefits as well. These often require letters. That is when I do gender affirming care assessments for both hormones and surgery. What we are doing is assessing how long has someone been engaging authentically as themselves? What are the potential mental health impacts? How do we make sure they're resourced enough for this to be successful and for them to feel affirmed and cared for in the ways that they need to be well? This can include things like something called top surgery, which is chest reconstruction or augmentation, bottom surgery, genital reconstruction, and sometimes facial feminization or masculinization. There might be other forms of surgical intervention as well. These are just some of the main ones. And finally, in discussing other of the aspects of transition, I just want to name some of the emotional aspects. Transition is absolutely a journey. It is not just medical, it is social, it's emotional, it's deeply personal. And your grandchild going through this process might have a lot of feelings, will likely have a lot of feelings about it along the way in different ways. Affirmation, quite simply, brings relief. Feeling seen, being supported can bring joy, can bring calm, can bring confidence, and can reduce something called gender dysphoria, which is the distress folks can feel when they're not feeling in alignment with their gender. Connection absolutely is a healing thing. Open, loving relationships can be a protective factor and reduce risk. Youth in this situation often feel very vulnerable. Your questions can come off more as challenging than you might intend them to when you're trying to learn. So being thoughtful about how you ask questions, how you invite conversation, offering curiosity, not correction, I think is really important here. You also have an opportunity to really celebrate them with milestones. Every step they take towards being more like themselves can feel like a really emotional step. I think this can also be a really beautiful opportunity to integrate cultural pieces too. I talk sometimes with families about, how we might engage in a B'nai Mitzvah as an example to affirm a child entry into Jewish community. And a lot of cultures have pieces like that where you can think about how can we celebrate and honor your transition. And certainly today of all days, we know this so clearly, external pressures can add stress. There is so much that young people are carrying, navigating these anti-trans laws and the media coverage, so much fear, isolation, and anxiety that youth and families, and maybe even yourself here on this call, are navigating. Community is the antidote. Thank you for being here and getting yourself that community, because spaces like Parenting with Pride are how we get through. And again, I want to just emphasize, even if you are not sure how you feel, affirming behaviors, how you act, even if you're in process, the behaviors are protective factors. We know from the Trevor Project that, LGBTQ young people who reported living in very accepting communities attempted suicide at less than half the rate of those who reported living in unaccepting communities. That is a huge statistic. We also know that trans use name and chosen name and pronouns being used also significantly improves mental health and reduces risk of suicidal thoughts, attempts, and depressive symptoms. Your efforts to practice their name, however uncomfortable, to practice their pronouns, they make a difference. Some of the behaviors that youth have expressed make them feel the most seen include trusting that I know who I am, trusting young people, believe young people when they tell you who they are, standing up for me. Some of my favorite stories with the elders I've worked with have been when they talk about the ways that they stand up for their grandchildren, whether it's calling ahead to a restaurant and making sure there's a bathroom that feels comfortable, or, calling the rabbi and saying, what services can you offer my grandchild for them to feel seen? Calling the school and saying, like, what are we going to do to make my grandchild feel safe here? Whatever that looks like for you, whatever your spheres of influence, standing up is a really big factor here in this moment. And I think sharing your stories as well about the ways you have this legacy and history of ways you've had to stand up in your lifetime can be a real powerful reminder, the history of what you've seen. Another important one, not supporting the politicians that advocate for anti-LGBTQ plus legislation, looking up things about LGBTQ plus identities on your own, attending groups, attending spaces to deepen your understanding, getting that learning. We had one grandparent who really struggled a lot in one of our groups. And at the end of one of our sessions, we were like bracing for her to share about some resistance, because usually she did. But she said, my grandchild came up to me this week and said, I heard you were in this group and my heart grew 3 sizes. And she was like, I just melted. Like, I'll do whatever I have to. Your efforts absolutely make a difference. Respecting pronouns. I've had some folks who've described the efforts, the care that family members have made, but that pronouns are sometimes a gap because those, maybe whether it's being a grammar stickler or whatnot. But I think making sure that we attend to that, it's a small thing, but it can really be a way of showing up with love. Some other quick tips for how to show up with love: remind them that you love them. Say it. Make sure they hear it. Say their name and pronouns and practice until it's natural. Celebrate their growth, their joy. Ask, how can I support you today, every day? Keep learning, keep trying. Instead of, you'll always be my granddaughter, try, I'm proud of who you're becoming. Or instead of, this is hard for me, try, I'm learning so I can support you. Thank you for your patience. Thank you for your grace. Focus on the strengths and the positive narratives. Yes, it is a challenging time to be trans and to be the grandparent of a trans or non-binary grandchild. And trans youth and adults are creative, loving, wise, and they build community and advocate for others. They are powerful. And your support helps them not just survive, but thrive as well. Don't forget how important that is. And if you found this helpful, I want to share some resources for continued learning with you. I want you to know that if you are interested in a space like this where we talk more and you're able to share more of your story, I absolutely welcome you to join our group. I know I posted the link a little bit earlier. I also want to share my colleague who runs this group with me, Rebecca Miner, recently wrote an article about our experience in group. So if you want to learn more, you also can read that article. I just popped that into the chat. But our first meeting, if we have enough participants, will be June 25th. So please feel free to sign up and share it. I also, in my practice, offer affirmation skills coaching. If you want to keep exploring, build your knowledge, and really have it be tailored to your unique grandchild experience, your experience with your children, which I know can be complex as well, and want a space where you can feel supported and held compassionately, I'm here to help you become the best champion for your grandchild you can be. I also wanted to share some other great resources. PFLAG, who is a part of, I know, funding Parenting with Pride as well. They have some great resources. Equality Florida, of course. Kesha, which I know my dear Tracy popped something in the chat from Kesha. It has a lot of great resources. That article that I just shared is in here. And my amazing colleague Rebecca also just wrote a book called Raising Trans Kids: What to Expect When You Weren't Expecting This. And it is wonderful and so useful. So if you are looking for a read, that could be good. I just wanted to say again, thank you so much for being here. It has been a privilege to be able to share this information with you. This is my contact info if you want to connect with me or ask me any other questions. I'm happy to connect and hope to see you in some capacity in the future. And I have some slides here to share for you, Jennifer. But before I do, I just wanted to say you do make the difference. You are incredibly powerful. Part of Rebecca and I starting this group or committing to this group was we had just lost our grandmothers, and it felt so powerful to be in the space with other grandparents who were here saying, "We love you and we want to work on this. We care." So don't underestimate how powerful that is. Jennifer, do you want to share about these resources that you put up here? And I'll make sure to progress the slides.
Yeah. Well, first of all, thank you, Dr. Danny. That was great. I'm sure that everyone on this webinar learned something new, and I hope that the biggest takeaway is that your support of your grandchild and of your children, because your children are navigating this with your grandchildren, and so being that supportive person to say, I'm learning, I'm trying, but I'm here. And the simple thing that you can say, the number one thing, what I tell parents whenever they come to me at whatever part of their journey they are, is letting their child know that you love them and you support them and we will figure this out. And those are easy
Mhm.
things to say and then to look into and get these spaces. And so thank you for that presentation. I love that. I
Absolutely.
also, yes, there's a couple. So if y'all, I'm going to make sure that a follow-up email goes to everybody who attended. I will give them all the resources, Dr. Danny, that you provided in here so folks have it. If you have your cell phones, I have QR codes on the screen if you like. I don't know, that might be challenging. I'm not sure. I know my mom won't be able to do that, but I will send these out. But Parenting with Pride, which is the organization, part of the organization with Equality Florida, we offer these webinars once a month in collaboration with PFLAG, which I'm going to talk about in a second as well, and Florida PTA, creating those safe spaces for our families. Yes, it has been a rough day. I'm sure there's more rough days to come. But when we come together, when we have spaces like this where we can learn, where we can really support each other. So if you're not a part of Parenting with Pride, I invite you to be part of our community. We have over 2,500 families. And what we do is we hope to educate you, to support you. On our website, there's a button that goes directly to me, a Get Help button. If you ever have questions or if there's any situations that you have with your grandchildren, with your family, in the schools, our Safe and Healthy Schools Department is incredible. We have relationships in almost all our school districts, and we want to make sure that we are here supporting you. Next slide. And so one of those programs, so we are having our Parent Education Summit. This is instead of our webinar next month, this will be our big twice a year. We do these big annual summits. And I like to say that this is a boot camp for parents. It's also for educators. We get our kids ready for school. And I know right now we don't want to hear back to school, but it's coming. And so I would love for y'all to register for this. This is going to be incredible. It's going to be from 10 to 2. It is free, is virtual. It's going to be on Zoom. We're going to have a keynote speaker who is going to be talking about anti-bullying. She's amazing. We're also going to have a panel, Voices from the Front Lines. We'll have a school board member and folks from PTA and parents and district folks really giving us the information we need to make sure that we're ready for school. And then we're also going to have a workshop within that on self-care, on for us. how do we take care of us? Because we know that if we're depleted of all our energies, how are we giving that to our kids? And so I like to say we get our kids all ready for school. We get their book bags and their pencils and their uniforms and all of that. But what do we do for ourselves? So here's the answer to that. Again, I'll be sending this out, but we hope you join us. Thank you. And PFLAG, so I mentioned that Parenting with Pride is also part of PFLAG. PFLAG is a fabulous organization. It's across the country. We have, I think it's either 16 or 18 chapters here in Florida. I'm very excited. I run the one since 2017 here in Miami, but we have great chapters. It's a safe space. Many of us have in-person meetings once a month, but they also have, this is a virtual space just for grandparents. And so if y'all are interested on pflag.org, you also could tune in and see that they're having this space. And I love, Danny, that we are really identifying that these are incredible allies. Like, don't mess with a grandparent, right? Like, I'm a grandma.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I get it. I get it, because anyone messes with my little perfect child, because she's perfect. Yeah, you have that fire, and you have more of that time that maybe you didn't have when you were raising your kids, to put into volunteering, to put into, being that ally and standing up. So I love when we get parents and grandparents that attend our PFLAG meetings and want to learn more. Listen, show up at our school board meetings. Come to Tallahassee at Pride at the Capitol. There's a space for you to be there as a resource. And you're right, like your grandkids are going to think you're like the coolest, because what better way to have an ally than have like a grandmama bear, right? So this is another space for that. And then I mentioned we're also part of PTA. PTA is Parent Teacher Association. If all you remember, most PTAs are attached to a school and they support the families in that school. And I'm very proud to be president of Florida's Kaleidoscope PTA. It's one of only 2 in the nation. We are a standalone statewide chapter. And again, creating that safe space. This is open for students and parents and grandparents and community leaders. And so again, we want to just make sure there's all these places for you to get involved, for you to receive support and to give support.
Awesome. So many amazing resources. So in our final bit of time together, I just wanted to offer some final reflections and open it up to any questions that you might have. What is one thing that resonated with you? One way you'll show some support this week, and any questions or thoughts you want to share, I welcome you asking away. But I'm just so grateful to have you all here with us. It's always so exciting to have almost 20 grandparents here tonight. It's amazing. Thank you for being here. Yes, it does take a village.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
one of the hallmarks of villages in that story of It Takes a Village is the elders. We need you. You're supposed to help teach us. We need you. And sometimes I feel like in the way our society is kind of set up with people moving around and all of that, we miss that part. And this is an opportunity for you to show that you're here. And it doesn't have to be in person all the time. It can be virtual. It can be on the phone. But again, just saying, I love you. I'm here for you. And figuring out what's going to be your way of showing up. I would love to hear what ways feel authentic to you, if you feel comfortable sharing in the chat.
And I think making sure that your grandchild knows that you attended tonight. I think that that'll be, you'll definitely score some brownie points, letting them know, hey, I attended this webinar with Parenting with Pride, and I really learned something about you, or even if, let's say that your grandchild isn't transgender, but I guarantee they have friends that are. There might be other family members that are. Our biggest allies are folks that really understand the LGBT community. And so you never know when this is something that's going to be personal to you. This could be a coworker that, we say signs of visibility, right? Having a little, rainbow pin. I know when I get on the airplane, and I travel a lot for work now, I notice when they have, they welcome you on the plane, and sometimes I see a little pin, and I always point out, love your pin. So, knowing that's a safe person, by educating yourself, you're becoming that safe person for anyone in your family and outside your family. And one of the things you said tonight that really, really resonated with me is, standing up for your grandchild. And so I think that right now, it's a very difficult time. We hear a lot of anti-trans rhetoric. And so being
Mhm.
educated to point that out if you hear someone say something or misinformation, you being that person to say, hey, actually, did you know what it means to be transgender? Or, hey, that's kind of offensive. Like there's someone in my family or someone who I love is transgender. So really, being that one person that stands up.
Absolutely. And, there is a lot of assumptions about elders that you're not going to get it or that like you're not going to be accepting. And from my experience, that's simply just not true. Elders want to show up and they want to figure out how. And you being here tonight is a reflection of that. So you standing up and saying something, I think you have a particular kind of power in our community as the elders. So don't lose sight of that you speaking up has a special space in our community. And again, I love what folks are saying in the chat. Like, you are not alone. There's a lot of support. PFLAG has great options if you want to just be in community with grandparents. If you are interested in having a space with mental health professionals guiding it, I'm happy to be that space with Rebecca Miner. There are lots of different ways. People on this chat, feel free to connect with each other. I think come to Parenting with Pride events as well that might be community-based spaces. I know Jennifer sometimes holds in-person things even. Uh, or even PFLAG event or not PFLAG events, as well as Equality Florida events, I think are great spaces to show up to. So being in community, I really think that's the antidote to how we survive days like today with this kind of legislation, and that connecting to joy and loving each other is something they can't take away from us, even when they legislate things away.
I love that. Yes, the
Yeah.
joy. Yeah, I love that. Oh, Jenny, I love that your dad's here tonight.
Mhm.
I love that. Yeah, I'm really thankful that my stepmom and my mom were here tonight, and I hope everybody really takes away that joy. And again, if y'all need support, if in your spaces you're looking for trainings or anything like that, please reach out, because we have so many folks that offer that. And so let's leave it with that tonight. Oh, thank you, Mom. My
Oh, that's so
mom,
sweet. I love
uh,
it.
love it, love it. Well, thank you again, Dr. Danny, for being here
Yeah.
tonight. Thank you, everyone, for taking an hour out of your time. Hold each other close. We're going to get through this, and I hope to see y'all again at our big summit in July. And we have lots of other things. And I hope to get your colleague maybe on a webinar to talk about that fabulous book. That might be a webinar that's going to come up in the future, because I think she would have a lot to offer to our
Oh,
family.
so
So
much. She's brilliant. So,
I
so
love
much.
it.
Yeah.
Stay tuned. All right,
Awesome.
everyone. Have a great night. Thank you again for joining.